Hi guys, it's Shelly with Shelly Cooks. I'm waiting for some rolls to rise, and I thought I would make some Nanaimo bars. So I thought I would record it and see if you enjoy the recipe. It's Christmas, or close to Christmas, I should say. Today's December 1st, so it's time to. A lot of people have already begun baking for Christmas. I shouldn't say it's time to start. But for me, it's time to start. So this is really the beginning for me, and I have a list of probably about 15 things that I will be baking. So maybe I will do some of them for you. So let's get started with this recipe for Nanaimo bars. So I have all of my ingredients gathered over here. So what I have here is a half a cup of butter that I am melting. And to this, I'm going to add a quarter of a cup of sugar. I'm also going to add 5 tablespoons of cocoa powder. And we're going to stir this until the butter melts. That's the end goal here. And this is going to be the base of our squares. You want to make sure that your water on the bottom is warm. You don't want it boiling, and you definitely do not want it touching the bottom of your bowl. So this is like a double boiler without it being a double boiler. So I'm just going to keep stirring this well. At some point, I will have to whisk this because we have an egg that has been beaten here, and we will drizzle that in after this butter has melted, and it will actually cook in the butter and the heat. So at that point, when I start to drizzle that in, I will switch to a whisk. Okay, our butter is almost there. Let me get my little whisk. So I'm going to switch to the whisk here. Get this all off. I have the heat on medium-low. So I want to make sure, one of the goals in heating this up enough is you want to make sure that your sugar has, it's no longer grainy. So I'm just going to turn that down a little bit. Rubbed against it, and I guess I turned it to medium. So it should become smoother looking as the sugar melts and starts to dissolve. This is, as I think I may have mentioned already, this is our base layer. I can still see the grains of the sugar. Because I use an organic cane sugar, and it's the grains are not as fine as the regular white sugar, it's going to take a little bit longer for them to dissolve in this mixture. But make sure that it is dissolved before you add your egg. Turn that down just a tiny bit more. So now, guys, this here is done with what we have to do with it. And now I'm going to drizzle this egg that I have here into it. And I am going to remove it from the heat first. So I'm going to just temper this a little bit. And all that means is that I'm going to add just a tiny bit of this mixture in with the egg first, just to make sure that it doesn't curdle when I add it in. Okay, so I'm just going to add a tiny bit in there. Now the recipe didn't say to do that, but I know that anytime you're adding egg to a hot mixture, it's always better to temper it first. So now I'm going to remove this bowl, and I'm just going to slowly drizzle this egg in. We don't want to cook it, we're just going to slowly add it in. Okay, a little bit at a time. There. And we should end up with a nice smooth batter. Or, it's not quite a batter yet, but it will be. You can see how nice and creamy looking that is. That tells us that our egg didn't cook and that we did it properly. So this is going to be our base. Now, this egg is already cooked and it's thickened already, but we're just going to put it on here for maybe another 30 seconds and continue whisking. Don't stop whisking. That's what you're going to do the entire time. That's perfect. That is perfect right there. So let's take that off. So here I have the chocolate, the cocoa, the butter, and the items that we did on the stove. Cocoa, butter, sugar, and 1 egg. To that, I'm going to add now a teaspoon of vanilla. I didn't add it when it was on the stove cooking because I wanted the vanilla taste to be strong. I didn't want it to cook out at all. So the recipe did say, however, to put it in on the stove. This was my decision. Okay, so to this, we're going to add a 1/2 cup of chopped walnuts and 1 cup of desiccated, oh, I have it here. 1 cup of desiccated coconut. I just had regular coconut from the big bag at Costco, but what I did was I just put it through the food processor, and just so that it looks like snowflakes. It's a little finer. It's a lot finer actually than the regular coconut is. And now I'm going to add 2 cups of graham wafer crumbs. 1 and, whoopsie, 2. Maybe 2 and a tad. So all of this I'm going to mix up and then put it in the bottom of my lined 8x8 pan. That's my oven going off because I have rolls that I'm also making, and they need to go in the oven. I'm actually finding this is getting a little bit dry, so I'm actually going to use my hands to bring this together. My hands are nice and clean. They've been washed, gosh, in the last hour, a good 7-8 times. Oh, that's looking really good. That's going to be a really nice base for these squares. That's looking really good. So these do not get baked. These are refrigerated, which is why it was important that we cook the egg in the hot butter mixture with the double boiler type thing we were doing there. So now I'm going to just break this up in the bottom of this pan and flatten it out. I'm going to make a nice even layer in here. And then I'll use the bottom of one of these little stainless steel tins or anything flat to give us a nice firm bottom. Okay, I just wanted to just give this a little quick again. Okay, There's not a whole lot of butter in there. It's only 1/4 cup. But I did use a bigger bowl because we need to add 2 cups of icing sugar to that. But what we're going to add in next is 3 tablespoons of a custard powder, and I'm using Bird's custard powder, but that's Bird's, and 3 tablespoons of milk. And I'm just using 2%, so you can use whatever you want, milk, I think. So I'm just going to, this is where you get the really nice color, yellow color, I guess, for the, that the bars are known for, the Nanaimo bars are known for. Although I have seen them where they are white as well. So I guess it just depends upon the custard that you use. So I did also sift my icing sugar because I find that icing sugar is often very lumpy and it's hard to break it down when you start mixing. So it's always best to sift it first. It's like if you're doing things like a cream cheese frosting or something like that, often what will happen is that you will not be able to get the lumps out from the icing sugar if you don't sift it first. Just do yourself a favor and take an extra second just to sift the icing sugar. So I'm just going to start this out really low because I do not want to make another mess. Once it comes together nicely, I'll gradually turn the speed up on it. Now that is quite thick. I am going to add just a tablespoon or maybe even half a tablespoon more of the milk. This is just a little too thick, I think, because it also has to sit for 15 minutes before you actually top your squares with it, before you add it to the base, and it will thicken up even more then. So yeah, that's what it needed, just a little touch more of, I think, the milk. So that's looking really good. Let's scrape this down a bit so we can get everything in there. Okay, still quite thick though. So I'm just going to let it go for a second more and I'll see if I'm going to add, yeah, I may just add a tiny bit more of the milk to it, actually. Maybe a teaspoon more. Because as I said, this is a custard powder, so it will thicken up as it cools even more. Yeah, that's more of what I want. Yes, that is beautiful. That is more of what we want for this. That's really nice. It's creamy. And after it sits for 15 minutes, it will be even thicker, which will be a nice consistency for cutting. So I don't know if it's the powder or what, that this time I needed to add a little more of the milk, but that's all right. We know what we're looking for. There, that's beautiful. So now we let this thicken up, let it stand for 15 minutes. So that's what we're going to do. We'll let it stand for 15 minutes and then we'll come back and top our base with it. It's actually the next day, guys, and I'll be finishing these squares up. It was late last night, and so I just put them in the refrigerator and let them chill figured I'd do it today. So here I have 7 ounces of dark chocolate that I'm just going to break up. And I'm going to pop this in the microwave for 30 seconds initially, and then for 10-second increments to melt it. And I'm going to add a teaspoon of butter to it to give it a nice glossy look, and we'll top our squares with that. Okay guys, so we're getting there. When you melt your chocolate in the microwave, you don't want to melt it entirely. You want to melt it probably about, I would say 75–80%, and leave chunks in there that you can stir in to melt as you're stirring it. And that'll make sure that your chocolate doesn't burn, that it doesn't get too hot. So never melt it entirely. So it's pretty much melted. Pretty much. So I'm just going to, while it's still warm, I'm just going to take a teaspoon of butter and pop that in there. And stir it in. And there's still enough residual heat in this chocolate to melt that butter. And that's going to give us the nice sheen on top with the chocolate for our squares. That looks beautiful. Yep, it looks really good. The bowl is just barely warm. So I know that I haven't burned the chocolate, and so we should get a nice crunch from the squares when we bite into them with the chocolate. The chocolate should snap, I guess is what I'm saying. And that's it. So now I'm just going to top our squares with this. And spread it out into a nice thin layer and let them chill. So before you cut these squares, what you want to do is bring them to room temperature, and that will ensure that when you cut them, you don't crack this chocolate that's on the top. It'll have an opportunity to just come up to temperature and soften just enough that you can make nice cuts in them. And of course, as usual, you want to make sure that you have maybe a cup of hot water on hand to cut your squares, and to dip your knife back and forth in the squares, and that'll also give you a nice, neat, clean cut. Okay. That looks pretty good. So, I think we're ready to put these in the refrigerator and call this one done. Christmas baking has officially begun.